Well, thanks for coming, guys. Today's seminar, how to drop body fat without feeling hungry or guilty. Hungry now, exactly. I was going to say this is a very common thing that happens whenever you're dieting. There's very few people that I know who have dieted without feeling one or the other, and a lot of this can come down, especially guilt, can come down to not actually understanding what we're putting in our body to allow us to make the progress that we want to do. So that's what we're going to do today. Happy to answer any questions at any point throughout or afterwards as well. Just let me know. So who's hungry right now, apart from Blake? Awesome. Awesome. Good. Who's not hungry now? Who ate in the last couple of minutes? Who's eating right now? There you go. Okay. Hunger is very normal. In some instances, especially when we're dieting and the goal is to drop body fat, you can treat it as a good thing because it means that our body is looking for sustenance, and if we haven't got any food, our body is going to ideally resort to fat stores. All right? Now, you would have read the stuff about nutrient density in your workbooks. Has anyone not read it yet? Could anyone explain to me what it means? Anyone at all? It's pretty much written there. So, nutrient, yes? Correct. Yeah, so pretty much nutrient density is talking about the quantity of nutrients in your food. Now, some foods will be very nutrient poor and some will be very high in nutrients. Fruit, vegetables, for example, are very, very high in nutrients. Things like oil are very, very low in nutrients. Now, where this all comes into play is stated at my third point. It's a misconception that our stomach can hold a certain caloric value. We can actually hold a certain weight of food. So if you consider the old ton of lead versus ton of feathers scenario, it can be applied straight to your food. So if you have, for example, a litre of oil, that could perchance have 10,000 calories in it. But if you then have the same kind of volume of broccoli, it might have 200 calories. It's still going to make you feel the same level of fullness in your stomach.
Actually, wouldn't that third one be that the stomach can have a certain volume or a certain weight?
Weight, yeah, essentially. Weight,
because
volume.
If you've got something that is like a ton of celery,
Correct.
the volume would probably be very different to say meat.
Yes. The studies that I've read have focused mostly on the weight of it. Stomach being able to stretch obviously as well would have impact on that. But the main point is that it's not based on calories, and that's where people often get confused. They'll say, well, look, I'm going to eat 2,000 calories because that's all my stomach can handle. But 2,000 calories of oil is a very small amount. 2,000 calories of vegetables is a huge amount. Your body will only stretch and expand to a certain point. So, yeah, weight and volume can be used very much in comparisons to each other. But this is to kind of probe you guys to start to think, what type of foods are you eating now? And we go into a bit more later. In terms of actually dropping fat, the types of foods you eat aren't strictly important when you're only looking at that body fat reduction or increase in body fat. When you're looking at health, yeah, completely important. When you're just looking at that kind of weight loss, weight gain, not so much. But what you want to do is, if you are feeling hungry, look at the types of food you're eating. Are they high in nutrients? Are they high in calories? Are they low in calories? You can start to make smart changes all over the place. A good one that I've seen before is cauliflower-based pizza or pizza bases. So instead of having something that's going to be more calorie dense for the same size, you can make it off of cauliflower, which is going to be much lower in calories, going to take up a lot more room in the stomach for the caloric value, which means you're going to feel fuller and you can eat more. You could essentially eat as many vegetables as you like. It'd be very, very hard to overeat vegetables. Has anyone started looking at this in their diets yet? Nope? Yes, one person. That's good. So that's something you guys can all go home today and do. Start looking at what food choices am I making. A lot of time people start to clean things up. They'll start to eat less and they'll start to see results, which is fantastic. When we want to stop feeling hungry, we need to look at the types of food we're eating, look at the nutrient density in there. As I said in the first point, low caloric value for high nutritional value means you have a nutrient dense food. High caloric value for low nutritional value is a calorie dense food. Okay? Who knows? Who can name some nutrient rich foods for me? Anyone, just chuck something out. I already said two. Broccoli, fantastic. Surely the sweet potato, awesome.
All your green veggies.
All your green veggies, fruits, legumes, beans, rice, even fish. These are foods that are much more nutrient dense, okay? So when you're looking at what you're making, look at incorporating this. If you, for example, make a dinner and you're balancing that on your calories and you see that it's not very big, you can easily chuck that out by substituting something. Maybe instead of having meat, you start chucking in beans instead. Instead of having something that uses a lot of oil or a lot of fat to cook in, substitute that. I mean, a lot of the time you can just use water instead of using oils and things like that to cook in terms of lubricating the pan. But looking at where you can make those substitutions, it'll make a huge difference to the way that you feel in terms of being full. So hopefully kind of trying to stunt that feeling that you get.
So are potatoes both food, both calorie rich and nutrient rich?
Yes. Well, they're not. Potatoes is like in the middle. They're the one food that'll make you feel the fullest. Saw a study on it. Out of every vegetable, they're the thing that's going to make you feel the fullest per quantity of it. Now, I believe it's because of its starchy nature and the way that it can absorb, so it can take on more weight. Now, yeah, so potatoes, still more calories in it because it is a carb, but not as much as, say, an oil or a fat. So you can definitely substitute that in, and then you take your healthier options by looking at your sweet potatoes and different versions of that as well. Okay? You've all seen this. To get that little reference, your oils, cheeses, meats, potatoes, rice and beans, fruit and veggies. Just a representation of how much your body can actually hold, your stomach can actually hold, of those types of foods. If you haven't read this bit, it's only a small section, but if you haven't read it in your workbook, make sure you actually get in and start reading it so you can start making changes if need be. Anyone here on a vegan or vegetarian diet? Cool. You will probably find that you're quite satisfied most of the time if you're eating a fair bit of that food, because, as I said, in terms of satiety, that's going to really fill you up. Protein, another thing that makes you feel much, much fuller. So again, protein doesn't have to be from meat, doesn't have to be from protein shakes. You get protein in just about anything, but it's about doing a bit of research and looking into what is high in protein, and again, where you can make those substitutions. Something that I've recently started doing is using black beans. Very high in protein, more protein in that than red meat per gram. Also makes you feel a lot fuller than meat does. So both there, you're getting that extra satiety from having the protein, but you're also substituting that meat for the beans, which are higher in protein as well and take up more room in the stomach. Any questions on any of that so far? Tips and tricks, okay? So the big topic that I wanted to cover was that nutrient density, because I wanted you guys to start to think exactly about what you're putting in the body in terms of that nutritional value and that caloric density. Little things that you can do if you're applying all of those methods and you still feel hungry is start to think, when was the last time I ate? Oh, sorry, are you hungry or bored? I'll skip one. Are you hungry or bored? Start to think, when was the last time you ate? It's very common that people make the misconception of being hungry when they are just bored or they haven't really got anything to do. So start to think, if you are feeling hungry, when did you eat last? Was it 20 minutes ago? Was it 15 minutes ago? Was it 5 hours ago? That'll give you a bit of a good idea of whether you are really hungry or whether you are just bored and trying to fill in some time. What are you doing right now? If you're moving around being active and you're still feeling hungry, you're probably hungry. If you're sitting at home, kicking back the 3rd episode on Netflix, maybe not hungry, maybe just bored, maybe just looking for something to fill the time. How long have you felt hungry for? Again, cravings come and go. If you're trying to kick sugar out of your diet, or if you have a diet that's high in sugar, you will see the blood sugar spike and drop, which will cause you cravings of those sugary type foods. And have you tried any of the other tricks before you move on to food? So this is just kind of a bit of a system you can work through before you make the decision to go and eat more than you need to. Okay? Physical hunger versus emotional hunger. Physical hunger comes on gradually and can be postponed, can be satisfied with any type of food. Once you're full, you can stop eating, and causes satisfaction, doesn't cause guilt. Okay? Emotional hunger comes on suddenly, feels urgent, causes specific cravings, often pizza, chocolate ice cream, that's that sugar we were talking about. You eat more than you normally would, often feeling uncomfortably full, leaves you feeling guilty and pretty upset with yourself. Okay? So I'm sure you guys could all reference that and think about times when you've been physically hungry in comparison to times you're just eating because of the sake of it or because you felt like you should eat emotionally. Questions on physical hunger, emotional hunger? No? Fantastic. So tips and tricks, as I said before, eating foods high in protein. The second one that I've got there, eating smaller meals more frequently. Now, this is one of the most common things that I often hear as a trainer. People say, I need to eat more meals all the time. Then I'll say, why? I say, because it helps you lose fat. And I say, how does it help you lose fat? And people don't know. People can often think that if you are eating all the time, you're going to lose more weight, but it doesn't happen like that. It's a trick that you can use to allow yourself to feel fuller over a longer period of time. But unless your caloric intake for the day is lower than your expenditure, you're not going to lose weight. So people take this and they go and eat 5 huge meals throughout the door and start gaining weight and say, oh, I can't lose weight, nothing's going to work for me. Doesn't work like that.
Just on that one, is part of the reason is obviously because you're feeling less hungry and not snacking much.
Yep.
But wouldn't part of it be the fact that if say you eat 1 large meal a day,
yep,
pretty much your body's going, I'll process all the fat, and then tries to undo that fat sort of for the rest of the next 23 hours.
Yeah, to a degree.
Whereas if you're eating constantly, or the smaller meals thing,
yep,
you don't need to quite do that.
Yeah, good question. So for those looking at home, what John just said is if you were eating 1 big meal in the day, your body's going to utilize the energy it does then. It converts some of the remainder into fat, and then your body's going to have to draw from that fat later in the day to use as energy. Look, realistically, that can happen and probably will happen. Eating smaller meals throughout the day will allow you to have higher energy levels, will hopefully prevent, you won't be required to store that excess fat initially because you'll have that constant intake of energy throughout the day. Whether it makes much of a difference, I mean, I'm sure it would make a small difference, but it's not going to be the difference between you successfully dropping body fat and not. Would there be more of a benefit in doing it with smaller meals? Yeah, I would believe so, but not so much that if you do it one way or the other, you're going to see one result or you're not. Studies have shown that you can go 24 hours without eating a meal before your body will actually start to shut down and use muscle protein as a fuel source instead of body fat. So if you are eating 1 meal a day, just make sure you're eating it within 24 hours. Again, I wouldn't recommend it, but it is potentially possible. Okay? So the big thing there is just making sure you don't exceed the calorie requirement for the day. And that's where a lot of the mistakes happen. And this is, again, where we're going to tap into a little bit later in terms of the guilt side of things. Drinking water. If you're hungry, have a big glass of water. See if you're still hungry. Okay? Sometimes you're just dehydrated. That's why you're feeling hungry. Okay? Get better sleep. If you're tired, you crave sugary foods because you're craving that energy kick. Okay? If you're getting less than 8 hours sleep a night and you're feeling hungry all the time and you're craving sugary foods, maybe start to rethink when you go to bed. Maybe start to rethink when you get up. Have a little bit of a planning session in that sense. I'm not a parent, I can't say myself. Get what's required for you, and if you are feeling hungry, try to get a little more, if you can. A cool little one, have a mint or clean your teeth. If you're feeling like food, go clean your teeth. How many people like the taste of food after you just had a whole bunch of mint in your mouth? Not many people. So that's just a quick little thing you can do. Have a quick mint at home, eat some toothpaste, and see if you still feel hungry. If you do, you're probably still pretty hungry, and it's probably real hunger. If you don't, it was probably a bit of emotional hunger. Questions on any of those? Anyone else got any tips that I haven't put up there that they think could help the rest of the group? No? All right, let's go on to feeling guilty. And this is one of the things that really can stop people because they have a warped perception of what they're actually doing. They have a warped perception of what they're putting in their body, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's good food or bad food. Okay? So first we need to understand what we're putting in our body before we can adequately assess whether it needs to change. Okay? What is the calorie? How much do I need? What is carbohydrate? What is fat? What is protein? Who can soundly answer all of those questions? Hands up. Cool. Who can tell me what a calorie is? Yeah, unit of energy. Okay? Sorry?
It's metric actually.
Calorie, yeah, a metric unit of... Oh no, calorie is not.
Yeah, it's kilocalories.
kilojoules. Kilojoules.
That says a calorie.
Calorie is the American equivalent.
It's still metric though.
Still metric?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
One's a measure of energy, one's a measure of water.
No, they're both a measure of energy. Kilojoules and calories are both a measure. They're a unit of measurement that we use to measure energy that we both burn through movement, exercise, work, whatever you're doing. But it's the same energy that we also intake into the body to provide that fuel. So it's both a measure of intake and energy, and the same energy is then expended through the exercise or work that we do. A kilojoule, which is what we generally use in Australia, a calorie is basically 4.2 kilojoules. It's the conversion that America has. Calories, we're generally talking calories here, smaller numbers, easier to deal with. Kilojoules is what you'll see on most of the packaging, or in all of the packaging in Australia. More and more these days, you're seeing underneath it in little brackets, it'll say calories. So if it doesn't have that, just divide it roughly by 4, and that'll give you your caloric value. How much do I need is the age-old question. And when you saw the boys the other week from Prodigy, they gave you a calculation that you can use to give you a bit of an estimate. But that's not necessarily going to give you a 100% accurate kind of measurement for you. If that's not working for you, what I often do is I get people to track their food, track their intake, every single thing they eat or drink. And that includes, the little condiments you put on top, the oils that you use to cook, every single thing that you put in your body, you track it over a week or 2 weeks, and we also track our weight over that time. If our weight is staying pretty stable and our food intake is pretty much the same, you can pretty safely say that that caloric value is our maintenance level. And from that point, once you have set that maintenance, we can either deduct or increase based on what our goal is. That's a pretty long-winded way about doing it, but it'll give you a pretty accurate response, okay? Or a pretty accurate answer for you to come out with. So once you have done that, you can establish how much you need. I wouldn't be dropping your caloric intake, depending on where you're starting from, but any more than 500 calories per day. Okay? If you were starting very low, so someone who would be low for me would be someone whose maintenance level would be about 1,700, 1,900 calories. If that's your maintenance level, then you might want to look at like a 200 to 300 calorie drop. If you're sitting up at like 3, 4, then you can easily drop 5, even up to 7 at times. Okay? Who can tell me what a carbohydrate is? Sophie? Yeah, exactly. So the starch kind of component of our food, it's the main form of energy that we use in our body. It converts into an energy called glycogen, which is what you use for, well, when I say the main energy for exercise. So it's what you use whenever you're doing your metabolic conditioning, you're doing your strength training, you're doing your boot camps. The vast majority of energy used there comes from carbohydrates, which get converted into glycogen. Fat is the next one. Fat is probably the most predominant energy form that we'll use in day-to-day activity. And once we've exceeded all that, once we've exceeded our carbohydrate in the body, and we are not working above or not working at too high of a level, you will have seen from the heart rate zone training section in your workbooks how to adapt your training based on your heart rate to maximize the energy that you want to use. Anything above 70%, you're going to be using predominantly carbohydrates. When you're lower than that, you're going to be using predominantly fat. Doesn't mean that you're not going to use fat at working at higher levels. It's just predominantly going to be the carbs. And again, if you completely exceed your energy, you've intaken as much as you're going to, and that exercise has pushed you above your intake for the day, that deficit ideally will come from the body fat stores. Okay? And protein is what we use to build. It's a building block in our body. So how we build muscle, how we regrow hair, fingernails, comes from the proteins and combinations of other things too. Carbohydrates, 4 calories per gram. Protein, 4 calories per gram. Fat is 9 calories per gram. So fat is over 2 times as caloric dense as carbohydrate or protein. Okay? Quick question, who knows how many calories a day it takes us to sustain a kilo of body fat?
3,500 calories per pound, isn't it?
To burn it, but to keep it alive in the body. 1 to 3 calories. Who knows how much to keep a kilo of muscle alive in the body? 40 to 70 calories. So what that says is if we can build more muscle, we can stave off more fat. We can eat more food. We need more food to sustain ourselves, which means that we're going to be less likely to overeat. Okay? Let's look at some reality versus perception. The reason I wanted to do this is, as I said, the whole guilt thing. People will have 25 grams of chocolate, that's a row, and they think they've ruined their entire day. I've ruined everything, my challenge is over, it's all done. I've eaten bad food, I'm going to get fat from that. Okay? When you look at it in reality, compared to 25 grams of almonds, which people would probably eat all day because they think it's a very good food, which it is, but they think it's a very good food that's not going to make them fat, it's actually got more calories for that 25 grams. Now, I'm not saying go out and eat a ton of chocolate instead of eating your almonds. What I'm saying is, if you go out and you have some chocolate, don't write your day off, don't write your challenge off, don't write your goals off, because it's not going to make that much of a difference. 134 calories you can burn. I burnt that in the warm-up at the first boot camp. It was a hard warm-up.
Stopping at that row. You can't stop at that row.
Yeah, self-control. So a good trick for that all comes down to the planning. Know how much you need to eat in the day, okay? And set that up. Have it probably after you've eaten. After you eat and after you're full, go and break all your food up into its portions and store it in little bags and containers, whatever you want, in those portion sizes. So you're not pulling a whole block of chocolate out and saying, I'm just going to have this little bit on the end.
Once it's open, it's gone.
That's why you have your meal first, so you feel more full. You don't feel like eating it. But you do that, you have it, and it is self-control, yeah. But the other side of things too is let's say you've planned to have one row and you end up having 3. Does that mean you should just have the whole block? No. But people sometimes think that because they think, well, I've ruined today, so I'm just going to write today off and start again tomorrow. That's when the majority of the damage happens. It doesn't happen from the extra 200 calories you had from a bit of extra chocolate. It happens from the extra 1,000 calories you had from having the block of chocolate, then ordering a pizza afterwards because you've written the day off. Okay? 100% of the time, almonds are the better choice. Healthier for you, more nutrient dense. Okay? But we're human. We like to treat ourselves sometimes. It would be unrealistic to say, I'm never going to have a piece of chocolate again. I'm never going to treat myself again. It's just about understanding what that is and how we can balance that out in our diet.
Chocolate-coated almonds.
Best of both worlds. There you go. But it's all about understanding what's in it. Tim Tam, 100 calories. A banana, 100 calories. Okay? Everyone would say Tim Tams aren't good, they're bad food. Not great for your health, no, but whether there's nothing in them that's going to make you fat. Okay, caloric-wise, exactly the same as a banana. Bananas are much more nutrient dense. You'll feel fuller from it. You'll have much more energy from it. But you could literally drop fat just eating Tim Tams. You would feel terrible, absolutely terrible. You'd have zero energy. You'd get sick. You'd probably break out on pimples everywhere. You'd get really sick. You wouldn't sleep properly. But technically, you could, but you just would not be very happy and you would not enjoy it. And if you try it, you will find out. I don't recommend trying it, but if you feel like you have to, you will find out the hard way that it's not a great way to go. Okay? So again, Tim Tams and bananas, same caloric value. Obviously, you get a lot more banana in comparison to the Tim Tams, so you can see why you're going to feel fuller from that. Everyone understand what I'm saying here? I don't want people to go out and then I walk downstairs and people are walking out with trolleys of Tim Tams down at Coles and blocks of chocolate. It's just a thing to start to get you thinking, okay? What am I actually putting in my mouth? Is it the end of the world if I treat myself? If it's my birthday and I go out and I have a piece of birthday cake, have I ruined my 12 weeks of work? No, you haven't. Okay? And we'll touch a bit more in a second. As I said, it does not mean our diet should be made up of poor quality food. Choosing these foods regularly can lead to being unhealthy, as we just discussed. It can affect our energy levels. Okay? Think of a day where you've had like 4 hours sleep and you get up and you just feel like shit and you don't want to do anything. Imagine if that was your everyday. How are you going to stay motivated to keep achieving results? How are you going to stay motivated to come to the gym, do 2 boot camps back to back, to stick to your diet? It becomes very difficult. So that's why, yeah, you can have a little bit, but make sure the vast majority of your intake is from those healthier options. Okay? It'll affect future food choices. Everyone could probably attest to a time they've gone out and had a binge, and they don't feel like eating broccoli afterwards. Shocker. Okay? That happens. But if we can limit it, you're going to limit those feelings. If you can stop yourself from doing it frequently, or you plan when you do it and when you're going to come back, you're going to be much more likely to be able to stick to that healthy option, the more nutrient-dense option that you had planned for originally. Can leave us feeling hungry. Again, very high in calories, very low in density, sugar spikes, blood sugar spikes, all those things are going to leave you feeling hungry, which brings us all the way back to the start of what we're talking about. Questions? Couple of big ones. Balancing, okay? So by understanding what we're putting in our body and balancing that out, we can limit the guilt we may feel from eating something we feel we shouldn't. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, this is what I was touching on just before. You can have little bits and pieces here. You just have to account for it, okay? Let's say I go out and I decide because it's my birthday, I'm going to have a big dinner and I'm going to have some birthday cake and a couple of drinks. That doesn't mean my whole goal should be ruined. What it does mean, though, is that the next day I'm going to eat a little bit less, or the next couple of days I'm going to eat a little bit less. I might go do an extra workout that next day when I wasn't going to, just to account for that. Another thing people get confused about is when you go to sleep at night, our body resets, correct? No, incorrect. It doesn't. We just keep going. So, if you do have a big meal on a Saturday night, you can still burn that off the next couple of days. It all comes down to that total energy balance. So don't feel guilty because you treat yourself. Just account for it, make up for it. Make sure you're doing something to balance your body back out. Okay? Where was I? There's a big difference between eating one or two things outside of our plan and eating a huge amount over, which, again, what I said before. Eating a roll of chocolate isn't bad. Eating 3 blocks of chocolate is probably bad, depending on your calorie requirement. But in most cases, it will most definitely not be great for you. We often eat a little outside our plan and feel as though we've written the day off. So then we eat a huge amount over our plan as we can start again tomorrow, right? That day doesn't matter. We've already written the day off, so it doesn't matter what we eat for the rest of the day. Clearly not true. Okay, you guys know that. The trick is to catch yourself. If you feel like you're starting to eat a bit more than you should, pull it back. You know what you should be doing. And if you can't pull it back, fix it tomorrow. Make sure you just got to be switched on. Make sure it's happening, okay? As I said, by accounting for overeating, by eating less the next day or two, adding in extra training, we can balance our intake and not feel guilty for doing it. Has anyone got any questions? Sophie, go for it.
What if you have one day out of the week where you might not necessarily follow the plan, you still eat healthy like majority of the day, but your thing might be you eat a pizza for dinner or something.
So is that bad? So.
But like if you do that and then just go the next few days, just sticking to your plan, calories. I know for me, I don't look at calories that I burn into, like I don't eat those.
Yep.
During those days that I do treat.
Yep.
But then on that one day, I do get to just get a little bit of every.
Yeah.
Is that?
That's fine. So for those of you watching at home, what Sophie just asked was essentially about a cheat meal. So yeah, you eat good all week, you stick to your plan, and then you might on a Saturday night have a pizza for dinner or something like that. 100% fine. Think about this. If you're in a deficit, a caloric deficit of 500 calories a day, and you are doing that for 6 of the 7 days, that means you're going to be in 3,000 calorie deficit for the week. If you go and have a pizza, even if you have 2 pizzas, you got to remember that you still have to hit that 500 calories. You have to add an extra 500 calories in just to hit maintenance. And then your body's going to have a certain barrier after that in which you're going to be repairing muscle and ideally building muscle as well. And then you've also got the thermic effect of food, which means that your body has to use energy to break down that extra energy that's in there. So if you're constantly in that dieting phase, it's definitely not I would say it's a good idea to do it. You know, I would always say between 5 and every 5th and 7th day, eat up to maintenance. Eat a bit more, okay? Because it'll allow us to kind of slow down that process of our maintenance level dropping, and we'll be able to sustain the amount that we're eating to continue dropping body fat for longer. So definitely don't feel guilty about that. Let's say you do it and then you go out and you have a pizza and then you go ahead and have 15 drinks as well. See some nodding at the back. Account for it, okay? Actually have a look at what's going to be in those 15 drinks, okay? It'll shock a lot of people, especially if you're someone that drinks a lot of mixers and things like that. It'll shock you how much is in there. So it'll wake you up to it. And it doesn't mean never do it again, but it means pick your mark, okay? It means, okay, well, It's your birthday. Let's keep using that example. You're going to go out for your birthday, so we're not going to drink for a couple of weeks leading up to it, and then we're going to make sure we account for it over the next couple of days by putting in a couple extra training sessions, by eating a bit less food, probably not on the day because it'll just go to your head, but eating a little bit less a couple of days around it, and just making sure that you have planned that out and balanced it. Does that all make sense? Did I answer your question? Cool. John, you had something?
Yeah, I've got it's kind of two questions, kind of one.
Go for it.
You mentioned about mixed drinks.
Yes.
How does this sputamine affect weight loss? Which is like stuff in diet, soft drinks.
Yep.
And artificial sweeteners. And the other thing is how does GI work with?
Good questions. In terms of the soft drinks with the sputamine, it's directly to the body. It's being 0 calories. It's going to have zero effect in terms of weight storage. It's going to be more in terms of the way it makes you feel. It's going to trick your body into thinking there's sugar there when there's not. So you're still going to get that same chemical reaction in the body, but we've had the sugar there to actually sustain it. So directly in terms of body fat reduction or body fat gaining, it won't have any effect. In health, I don't have the knowledge behind me to tell you exactly, but definitely in terms of body fat reduction, it's not going to make you store any excess body fat. In terms of, what was the second question, sorry?
The second question was
GI, yeah. So the glycemic index is something that, again, can be a bit confusing. Pretty much all the recent studies show that it basically has no effect, in the sense that if you were to have it by itself and you hadn't eaten food for 4 or 5 hours and then you went and had pure sugar, yes, you would get a spike in your blood sugar and a spike in your insulin, which would result in higher fat storage. But how often do we go 4 or 5 hours without eating food and then we just have a bag of lollies and then we don't eat anything for another 4 or 5 hours? Some people it can happen, but that would probably be the only kind of situation where it would have a bit of an effect. Majority of the time when we're eating, white potatoes, white rice, white bread, things like that, we are having it with other food. So the fats, the other proteins, the other carbs in there, they actually slow down the digestion of the food, so that blood sugar spike doesn't happen. Cool? Answer your question? Sweet. Blake?
Any hints and tips for someone who can't jam enough calories down his throat?
Any hints and tips? Yeah, fine.
I'm struggling to eat enough to,
How much are you eating?
Well, according to the calculations from the guys at Prodigy, I should be taking about 12,000 kilojoules.
Yep.
I'm struggling to get 7,000.
Okay, gotcha. So, tips and tricks. I would actually look at probably start trying to space that out a bit more during the day, in terms of having a few smaller meals instead of big sittings. Look at potentially things like mass gaining protein shakes, because when you're drinking the liquids down, it's not going to make you feel as full. It might initially, but you're probably going to urinate a fair bit of that out. Other things you can do, you can look at calorie dense foods like nuts that are very healthy for you, that are healthy fats, but are going to have a lot more calories in that per gram. As I said, over 2 times as much as your other food options. So looking at making those kinds of choices and eating enough of that to sustain it. And a lot of the time, it just takes a bit of practice, to be honest. Like you have to get yourself to get into that state and feel hungry for it. And it sounds like you're already not getting a ton of sleep, so I wouldn't suggest getting up earlier to eat more. But
It varies.
yeah,
But normally about 6 hours.
yeah. Look, I think if are you eating a lot of nuts or anything, or avocado, things like that at the moment.
I've been trying to snack on things like trail mix and cashews and that between meals.
Yep.
Big bowl of oats in the morning, cooked lunch, cooked dinner, protein shakes at least 2 a day.
Yep.
That sort of gets me up at 7,500.
Yep. I would then look at, as I said, just slowly trying to increase it. So look at where you are and then have a bit of a structured plan. So cool, well look, next week I'm going to be doing 8,000. Okay, then I'm going to be doing 8.5 and I'm going to be doing more. So you can steadily do it, because if you just go and try to double your intake, you're going to be sitting there just bloated on the couch and it's going to be very hard. So yeah.
Yeah, it makes me feel sick of eating.
Yeah, definitely. So you don't want to be doing that. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I just think I was just
Yeah, nuts. I'd say start with nuts.
3 or 4 beers in lunch and fix it.
That's not going to fix it. Other questions? Sophie? You're right. More questions the better.
Another problem I
Yep.
and increase it. But I keep running into problems like, obviously my kids out kind of help their education, but I keep running into issues such as that I'm going over my protein, adjusting my carbs, and sugar seems to be very common in there.
Yep.
But from what I'm looking at eating, a lot of it seems to come from fruit that's with sugar. So is that going to impact that, or?
No, so is the question, how do you maintain the muscle, or I couldn't quite hear you, sorry.
Will that, so like, because I've heard rumours of things like if you eat too much protein or if you eat too much sugar or too much carbs or that, everything, that you eat too much of that, then it converts fat rather than muscle.
Yeah, no, to put it simply, you can't really, like, it'd be very, very hard to eat too much protein. You hear these freak stories of protein toxicity, but it doesn't happen. You would really have to eat a lot. In terms of the sugars, yeah, there's sugar in fruit, fructose. Probably it's the fastest acting sugar, but the thing is fruit has fiber, so it slows down the absorption again. In terms of looking at muscle and how it's going to affect that, whenever you're dieting, it's very hard to build muscle. Very, very hard, because in order to build muscle, you need to be in an energy surplus. In order to drop body fat, you need to be in an energy deficit. So what you want to be looking at doing is focusing on keeping your strength training up and trying to maintain the volume that you have to maintain the muscle that you do have. In terms of the food choices, if you were having between 1.5 and 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, you'll be fine. Does that help? Cool. Anything else, guys?
Yeah, I've got one. With like being, like in the summer, I do a lot of road cycling, then more like do 60 to 100 k's. Is it worthwhile having like a big carbohydrate meal the night before, so that way I've got the big energy stores there when I go out on my ride? Yeah,
definitely. And I would even take things on the ride with you, like gels and that as well. But again, in terms of pure performance, I would imagine that having that heavy carb meal the night before and having the stuff during the day would help in terms of looking to drop body fat. As long as it's balanced. Like if you account for it, if you're out doing that, how far did you say? Yeah, 60 to 100 k's. That's going to be burning a ton of energy. So you need to account for that. And as I was saying before, you don't just have to do it on the day that it happens. You might have it for lunch and dinner the day before. You might lead yourself up to it, so you have that energy to do it. I'd probably do a little bit more research on timing, nutritional timing for cycling to get a little bit more information. But as long as that balance is there, you'll be sweet. Lionel? Yeah. At night, do you say? Eating a lot at night? Yeah. Yeah. Again, another common misconception in my mind. You don't reset when you go to sleep. You can have a big meal at night. You're probably going to find it harder to sleep because you've had a big meal at night. Or if you're not sleeping a lot, you maybe look at the types of food. If you're having chips or things that are high in fast-acting carbohydrates, sugary things is what I'm trying to say. If you're having things that are high in sugar before you go to bed, then your body's going to be pepped up. You're gonna have more energy, so it's going to be harder to sleep. But it's not going to make you store fat because you're not using that energy, because you'll just use it the next day. If it's all balanced out and you're in an energy deficit for that day, like I said, it doesn't matter when you eat it. Because if you haven't eaten anything through that day, you haven't eaten much throughout that day, you're going to be resorting on fat stores and energy from the earlier meals you've had. And then if you have a big meal, the next part of the first bit of that day, you're going to be relying on that energy from that meal, or anything that's converted to fat, be drawing on those fat stores as well. So don't stress.
You just put another question. Exercise in the morning.
Yes.
Before or after food?
Depends on the intensity. So blue zone training, so low intensity. If you're for your primary goal to just burn fat, just do it before food. Because then if you're in a fasted state after having 8 hours of sleep, you're not going to have a lot of carbohydrate in the system, which means that your body will primarily use fat for fuel. If you're going to be doing anything that is higher intensity, then I would recommend eating. Some people really can't eat in the morning, so I would just make sure that you've had a good amount of carbs in the meal the night before. But as I said, anything above 70% of your max heart rate, I would be looking at having carbs in the morning.
The reason I'm just wondering is because I'm going to Melbourne next weekend for half an hour.
Yep.
And I was thinking maybe when I run, I just want to take like a banana and something beforehand.
Yep.
And nothing else.
I would probably look at doing what we're talking about with Daz, have a bigger meal the night before, and then have it in the morning, because if you're going to be doing that, you need as much energy as you can get. You're going to be running for 2.5 hours, depending on how fast you go. So I would definitely look at something in the morning, but if you just can't stomach it, I know there is a lot of people that can't, then just make sure the night before is bigger. Andrew?
Sodium and saturated fats and all those sorts of things, obviously you see that on the nutrient guide and whatnot. Is there things that, like I said, amounts we should be sort of limiting to and that kind of stuff?
There is, but I couldn't confidently tell you exactly how much you would need. Again, like, saturated fats are terrible health-wise, but when it comes down to body fat, it doesn't make a difference. Health-wise, it does, 100%. You don't want to be doing it because you don't want to clog your arteries. Would not be doing a lot. You need a little bit, but not a lot of it. But in terms of actually dropping fat, it doesn't make a difference if it's mono unsaturated or polyunsaturated or actual saturated fats. But I couldn't tell you too much about the salt, unfortunately. Anyone got anything else? Awesome, guys. Thanks for the questions. Loved it. Thanks for coming in. I'll see you guys all at boot camp tomorrow. Who's doing the double? 1, 2.
No, I'm not crazy.
Not crazy? All right, guys. Enjoy the rest of the challenge. I'll see you there tomorrow. Thanks for coming. No worries.